What's going on, everybody? Zack Rosenblatt here with Mike Kaye for our latest preview episode of the No Huddle Show. We're previewing the Washington Redskins game on Sunday in beautiful Landover, Maryland. The most exciting road trip in all the NFL.
Oh, man.
There's so much going on there. You know, they have like a Target over there, maybe. There's like a Wendy's on the way to the stadium. We went there last year.
It was Burger King, actually.
No, I haven't eaten at Burger King since I was a kid. It was Wendy's.
Are we sure?
I'm 100% sure. I have not eaten at Burger King, and I refuse to. So.
Well, that's how great the Wendy's was that I thought it was Burger King.
I just know for a fact that I did not go to a Burger King. So anyway, fun fact about me.
By the way, Burger King, if you want to sponsor us, it's fine.
Yeah, great Burger King. Yeah. Love your Whopper.
I was trying to write down all the things I'd rather do than be in Landover, Maryland on Sunday.
Too long?
Yeah, we would have to host like 4 other podcasts.
You don't even like to do that many things. So.
Yeah, you're right. It's unbelievable how stationary my life is. But this is.
So you're not bringing Brent, is what you're saying?
No, I'm not. From a beat writer standpoint, this is probably, if you cover the NFC East, your least favorite road trip.
I feel like the fans don't like it there either.
Yeah, well...
They travel for this game pretty well, usually.
Yeah, because the Redskins fans don't like being there either. Yeah, so, I mean, like...
God,
what an absolute
the
mess.
NFC East... The Eagles are the only team in the NFC East that actually lives where they say they live.
Yeah.
Dallas lives in Arlington. The Giants live in East Rutherford, and the Redskins live in Landover. Like, stop lying, people. Be the Landover Redskins, be the East Rutherford Giants, and be the Arlington Cowboys.
I'm pretty sure Dan Snyder actually does live at FedEx Field, so yeah, that's a...
he's not really doing it. He's like George Costanza in Seinfeld. He doesn't really know what he's doing there.
Yes, that's fair. I think that's a really good comparison.
He's working for the Yankees.
And I think Dave Gettleman's Larry David, so it's...
I mean, yeah. Oh, man, that's funny. Okay, so before we get into whoa, knock your mic down there with my powerful hit on the table. I pounded the table for emphasis. Before we get to our preview, we do have like an exciting thing to tell you guys about that Mike and I are pretty enthused to get going. It's called Eagles Extra. It's a new service we're doing. It really was successful with our Rutgers guys and our Devils writer. It's basically a text message service where we're going to be able to send you guys exclusives before it goes on the website, before it goes on Twitter. When we have breaking news, behind the scenes, our thoughts, observations, we can do ask me anything, Q&As. It's only $4.99 a month. The first 2 weeks are free. You can find the link to sign up for it on our Twitter, where it's in every one of our stories. That's on NJ.com/Eagles. We're really excited to get this going. We hope we already got some subscribers early. We're already building a little community. I know Mike's really excited about it, but
yeah, I mean, I think we've all been there, right? You go to tweet Jeff Goldblum, and you have a specific question about like his career.
Does he have a Twitter actually?
Whatever. For the sake of this,
I hope he does. He'd be great at it.
Yeah. I mean, he
does.
Yeah, sure, whatever. All right, so you go to tweet Jeff Goldblum.
Like, am I not following him?
Well, Jeff Goldblum doesn't have a Twitter because he really would buy into this idea because the thought of personalized messaging.
I would pay a lot of money for Jeff Goldblum to text me, by the way.
Well, I mean, if you follow me on Twitter, you know that I love doing random AMAs when I'm at Chipotle. Chipotle, if you'd like to sponsor, holler at us.
Sponsor the text messages.
Yeah. So this gives us an opportunity to give you content that's exclusive to what you want to know. I think a lot of the times fans are shy away from asking questions on Twitter because of the trolls or whatever, or they think it's a dumb question, or they don't feel like they can get an adequate response in a tweet response. So we feel like we can give you guys, we can change the game for the way NFL is covered, at least from a reader to writer perspective, and kind of offer you our insight. We're available. We're basically on call to you when you download or when you sign up for this. So we'll host AMAs like Zack said. We're very excited, but we're also going to give you exclusive content. We'll have exclusive practice photos, practice video, press conference video. We'll break news on there before we break news on Twitter or on NJ.com. So it's definitely well worth it. This 2-week trial, you can see how you can kind of see it firsthand and then decide what you want to do afterwards. Hopefully Zack and I don't, aren't as annoying as we think we are sometimes. But it's a really cool program that we're really excited about.
Yeah, so today after Doug's press conference, I pretty much, because we'll usually write some like thoughts off a press conference, I immediately sent out a text message with all my takeaways from the press conference, and it got sent out to all our subscribers, so they got to see that before anybody else was writing anything and before all the articles started hitting the internet. So it's just like a cool way for us to talk to you guys. You can ask us anything. We're going to get back to you as soon as we can. And that's our task for all Huddle Show listeners. We really would like you to at least test it out and see what you think. Let us know in the comments on this podcast. Let us know on Twitter. Let us know in the text messages. We're looking forward to this. All right, now to football. So news. There's nothing like huge news-wise. Oh, actually, no, there is. Alshon Jeffery is out for the year. I think we should have.
I would say that's pretty newsworthy.
Yeah. Because sometimes I forget.
I know
when it happened. We kind of figured he was going to be out for the year,
right?
But now we need to have the discussion about his future with this team. It's really complicated. This injury, at its worst, can go 9 to 12 months recovery, which is what happened with Jalen Mills. Although that was originally day to day, and then turned into him being gone for a full year. So if it's gone for, let's just say worst case scenario, he's gone for 9 to 12 months. That puts, or 10 to 12 months, or 11. It puts him coming back at the end of next season if he were to come back. So it becomes more difficult now. They can't just release him. It would have to be an injury settlement. You have more knowledge about that kind of stuff. Nobody's going to want to trade for him unless the Eagles are attaching a second-round pick to it, like the Brock Osweiler trade or something.
Yeah.
It's possible, I guess. But you still have to pay him when you do that.
Yeah, you're paying him regardless.
There's the dead cap hit. He's guaranteed, I believe, $11 million next year. If they just cut him... Well, again, I don't know. You can talk about that a little bit, but
they'd have to designate him a post-June cut, and that would allow them to.
Yes, but with the CBA, they might not even be able to do because the CBA is expiring, right?
Well, next year.
Next year, yeah. So, I guess, do you think Alshon? Just very basic question: do you think he's played his last game in an Eagles uniform?
No.
So you think they IR him next year, kind of thing?
If you're going to pay him anyway, you might as well keep him around. If he's not playing,
you might as well just IR him and then he can help at the end of the year.
Yeah, so that's the thing. He's found money in a lot of ways. If you put him on IR. What I think is actually beneficial about this injury is it's happening now. It's going to be a long recovery. You have experience with it with Jalen Mills. And so you can't count on him next year. So regardless of whether he's on the roster or not.
So you plan for him not being there, and then he's a bonus.
Correct, exactly. So even before the injury, I felt like they needed to draft somebody high and then sign a guy like Robbie Anderson or someone of that ilk in free agency at Philip Dorsett, what have you.
Not like a number one guy, but like a guy who's going to
right. You're drafting a guy who's going to potentially become a number one.
Yeah.
And I think this kind of puts it in perspective where Nelson's not coming back. Deshaun, whether he comes back or not, is not going to be a full-time player, I would assume.
Yeah.
So you need to fill at least 2 spots. You have J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. Greg Ward's shown you some stuff. Rob Davis got called up from the practice squad. He's a really intriguing player who we'll talk.
3 games to show something, yeah.
Yeah, he's an intriguing player that we can talk about later. But I think you go into it knowing no matter what you see over the next 3 weeks, none of that really matters. You have to address this wide receiver position. You have to
get younger,
upgrade the position. Remember, it's not just about getting younger. It's about upgrading the position.
No.
Getting
younger,
yeah. So Rob Davis could go out there and have 200 yards over the next 3 games.
Still need to get more.
Still need to invest in the position. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside could do something crazy. Terrific. Ideally, you should have a bunch of young cats or Eagles competing for wide receiver spots next year, and it should be an intense competition. This year there wasn't really an intense competition. It was Matt Collins versus Mark and Michelle and Greg Ward, and
the worst one won the job.
Right, and he didn't even really win the job.
Yeah.
So, by the way, Boston Scott has 7 more receptions in the last 2 weeks than he had in 2 months. But again, I think Jeffrey, a lot of people are looking at this as doom and gloom. So I'm going to look at it glass half full. You're paying him anyway. You're in the situation you're in regardless. Even if he was healthy and you wanted to cut him, you were still paying him. So now you have the option of him being, change under the seat cushion. You don't have to worry about him during the season. It's going to take a while. But if he's able to come back during the stretch run of 5 games, you have a veteran player with pretty decent hands outside of his showing in Chicago and New Orleans last year.
And this year.
Yeah. So
outside of all that.
No, but I mean, we can
at the minimum he's a capable receiver.
Right, we can
mock one anymore is different. Yeah.
Right, we can mock his production all we want, but entering the Week 14 matchup against the Giants, the Eagles were 0-4 when he played less than 2 quarters. They were 5-3 when he did play more than full game. So I do think that there's value there. Carson Wentz came out on Thursday, and said that he loves that guy and that they have a great relationship, despite rumors to the contrary. Whatever, who cares? I mean, honestly, at this point, that's a dead narrative. The narrative doesn't matter. If he's going to be injured next season, he won't really have much.
It's not important enough anymore for that to matter.
Right. So
that's the reality.
The reality of the situation is they better spend a first-round pick on a wide receiver, or at worst, a second-round pick if they're spending a first-round pick on a corner.
Part we didn't cover of this, and we kind of talked about this in the past, but so hypothetically, if the Eagles know that Alshon was that leak, do they just cut him now? I mean, I know this is the injury thing, but do you think they just move on from him then anyway? Because they might have been waiting to do that if that was the case. Like, we don't know if that's the case. I'm just throwing that.
Like this week?
No, I'm saying this offseason.
If I found out he was the leak, I think I said this at the time, I would cut him on the spot. Yes.
They were going to do that anyway.
I would agree with that, yeah.
Because I think that's like an interesting wrinkle to think about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that'll tell you how much they view him internally. What's interesting to me is, and I think you and I talked about this, when he dropped the pass in New Orleans, I don't think a Philadelphia fan base has ever been more forgiving of a player.
Crazy. It's even crazier in retrospect, considering how quickly they turned on him this year.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. So I think, it's one of those things where the next 4 or 5 months, we're going to find out a lot about Alshon Jeffery and his views internally and within the franchise. I think for the most part, publicly, he's been a good soldier. He's done what he's needed to do. He's made some incredible plays in the history of this team. And I think it's unquestionably the deal that he signed in 2017 is unquestionably a massive success, home run success. That said, they need to get younger at the position. He's injured almost all the time. I mean, even before this injury, he missed the better part of 4 games due to a calf injury.
I mean, the year he was great, his first year here, he had a torn shoulder the whole year he played with, which was valiant, but he had that.
Right, and then it forced him to miss several games the next year. So, again, I do think he plays again if they figure out that he was the source. Then maybe not.
Yeah. But like the other side of that is we're going to really find out over these next 3 weeks. I think J.J. Arcega-Whiteside is one of the 5 most important guys for the future over the next 5 weeks, or 3 weeks plus playoffs or whatever. Because I wrote about this. He's going to be playing a lot. He has been playing a lot the last couple weeks. They still haven't targeted him that much. He had a great catch last week. Maybe the best catch any receiver has had for the Eagles this season. But he kind of has to show them that he can be like a centerpiece among the wide receiver corps, so then they can determine how much they need to do this offseason in terms of whether they need to spend a lot to get a number 1 guy or trade up to get a guy who can be elite, or if they're like, all right, we have the assets to add a couple of quality guys and J.J. Arcega-Whiteside can be our number 2 receiver or something. We're going to find out a lot about him over the next few weeks.
And I agree, and maybe this is out of character for me, but I'm going to be a tough grader here. I think no matter what he does, at best, he should be your number 3 wide receiver in your mind heading into the, you know what I mean?
That's what they want him to be the second-round pick they invested in him.
Right. I think he is the long-term X receiver. You need to find the Z, and you need to find a long-term slot option. And, with the way the league's going, slot options can be your number 1 wide receiver. So I think, if you brought in Philip Dorsett and drafted a guy who could play all 3 spots, maybe that helps you long-term. Arcega-Whiteside comes out when they're in 11 personnel. But for the most part, those other 2 guys, like a Henry Ruggs, I'm a CeeDee Lamb guy. Lamb's what's for dinner. You know what I mean?
This receiver class is really good in general. So even if the Eagles keep winning and they're in the late teens, early 20s, they're still...
I'm drafting 2.
There's that other Alabama receiver. There's a dude from Colorado. There's another guy.
Oh, yeah, I like the guy from Colorado.
It's a great name.
Yeah, I can't even pronounce his name, so I won't even try.
Although, corner is all of a sudden a huge thing, too. So I'm curious if they draft a receiver or corner. Probably a receiver.
They seem to like LSU players, and this Christian Fulton kid is getting a ton
I saw
of
Ben
buzz.
Solak projected him to the Eagles, I think. But... yeah, I think so. This is a receiver position. It's funny that we're talking like this, considering before the season it was this is the best receiver group in the NFL or whatever. But I am interested to see, like, I think maybe even best case scenario or something. I could see the group looking something like where they have a rookie they use a first round pick on. They have a guy like Robbie Anderson or Philip Dorsett. They have J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. Maybe you get Deshaun Jackson back on a smaller deal. Maybe get him because after this injury, I think that's a pretty reasonable request for them to make. Mm-hmm. And then if Greg Ward is your fifth receiver, then you can feel pretty good about that group.
Yeah, I agree.
And then Alshon is a bonus. Inevitably, when Deshaun gets hurt or somebody else gets hurt.
I think having 6 receivers is going to be the new norm in the league, just for how many injuries.
On the Eagles, 3 receivers is the norm.
Right. Well,
we're going to get into that in a second.
That's yeah. And I apologize if you hear me coughing a little bit. I mixed
sick on like 50% of the podcast.
No,
year.
this isn't. I don't even think this is a sickness. I mixed Chipotle with red wine last night, and my entire throat is burnt. So from the acid. Anyway, on that note, speaking of being burnt, they need speed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's really what this is the slowest offense, I think, in the league. The only thing that's saving it is Boston Scott and Miles Sanders, really.
Yeah.
We brought up Rob Davis earlier. Very intrigued by him. Former 6th-round pick from Georgia State. Was a 2-time All-Sun Belt award winner. He's intriguing because he's 6'3" and he's 210, but he runs a 4.4. He didn't get a lot of play in Washington. He was mostly on the practice squad as a rookie in 2017. Missed his entire 2018 season with a broken fibula. Spent 3 games with the Redskins earlier this season. Was cut. The Eagles picked him up. He's been on the practice squad ever since. I know CBS, their draft people are very fond of him. But he's an intriguing guy. He's the cousin of Thomas Davis, the longtime Panthers, now Chargers linebacker.
Yeah, it's a fun fact I didn't know beforehand.
Yeah, he trained actually with Greg Ward at Michael Johnson Performance in Dallas heading into the draft, so they've got a friendship and a rivalry. So he's going to look to duplicate kind of the success that Greg Ward's had out there. I'm all in favor of adding young talent to the roster. I thought this should have happened sooner. When you're veteran,
when you're a grown man,
yeah, when your veteran wide receivers aren't giving you anything in the passing game, you probably should invest in guys that could have some upside. Davis is capable of playing all 3 wide receiver positions. I think from their standpoint this week, he's probably going to play a lot of Z receiver. And he has the speed to do it. I think he can kind of stretch the field a little bit. I think you'll get 1 or 2 surprise big plays from him. But then again, I also think the Redskins know what to expect from him, having been, monitored him for the last 3 years. So it'll be interesting to see if he's shown enough growth that he can kind of trick his former teammates in coverage.
So to go off that, Doug made it sound, so as of right now, it doesn't look like Nelson Aguilar is going to play. He didn't practice all week. So right now they only have, again, 3 active, healthy wide receivers. And Doug, in this press conference,
you love to see it,
made it seem like that's going to be the case again. He said, I view it as we have 9 guys if you count running backs and tight ends.
I think there's logic to that, but
I guess.
I mean,
it seems like they view Perkins as a receiver maybe, but he's a tight end is the reality. But I just why? Don't do that again.
So I was critical of them for only carrying 2 tight ends for most of the year, and for the most part it kind of worked out. And so I guess there's a lot.
Worse, I think.
Yeah, no, this is definitely worse. Yeah. I'm getting there. I think with that they view Perkins as a wide receiver first and a tight end second. Is I guess the logic there.
Or at least in an emergency situation.
Right. I mean, when your 4th wide receiver...
He looked pretty good last week.
Yeah. When your 3rd or 4th wide receiver was Mac Hollins for 6 weeks, I guess there's no real downside to that. When you've had to have a formation player, and I say that with finger quotes, the upside is there to have a guy who is multidimensional. I think they really liked Alex Ellis. I think the injury kind of just didn't work out well. But Perkins is a guy who's been in the system for 2 years. He knows the wide receiver position. He knows the tight end position. And frankly, I mean, we're getting to the point where it's all hands on deck. And, I know a lot of people are clamoring for Mark and Michelle. He'd be the guy who I'd promote if They did decide to add another wide receiver to the mix. He was out of work for 12 weeks, and he's probably not in the best football shape. I mean, I talked to him. He's been training in South Florida and New England with his brother, Sonny Michel, just hanging out. But realistically, he hasn't been in a competitive environment outside prior to last week in 12 weeks. So I understand why the Eagles would take their time with him. I do think Rob Davis is probably the more intriguing talent. There's a reason why no one picked up Marcus Michel.
Or though the point is that they need
right, they do. I mean, Marcus Green, to give you guys some better insight, plays exclusively the slot receiver position. He is 5'8", but he's got a lot of speed. Yeah. I think they'd be more inclined with the way Greg Ward's played and the fact that Perkins can play in the slot. I would think that they would be geared more towards an outside wide receiver, and that's why I think Michel makes more sense.
Yeah, and like one of the problems with only carrying through receivers, like last week, somebody pointed this out. Alshon at one point, like I think there was a play where Carson Wentz missed him deep, and Alshon called for like them to come in so he could take a breather, but they didn't have anyone to put in for him, so he had to stay in the game. And I'm not saying this is what caused it, but not long after he got hurt. They don't have as many older receivers in there now, so it's maybe not as big of a deal in that sense. Like, these young guys should be able to go the 4 quarters.
JJ actually said that he was tired.
But the inability to even rest somebody because you don't have the numbers is just like inexcusable. So I don't know who they cut. There are guys that, I mean, they have too many corners.
They have 7 corners.
I mean, I don't know who.
They have 7 defensive ends.
Yes. Yeah, one of the defensive ends, I feel like, is where they would go.
I'd
Deshaun Hall, maybe.
Yeah.
Even though he played quite more than John Avery didn't even play last week.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, you can't cut him.
Yeah,
you cut him, that's going to start a riot.
Deshaun Hall did play. Maybe they were trying to see what he has. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
But yeah, it's just one of the weird roster quirks at this team. Like, we have to come up.
They have 3 safeties. Yeah. It's like a very weird.
Yeah. And one of them is Marcus Epps.
And Marcus Epps still doesn't have a tackle, but he's played like 50 defensive snaps.
I don't think when they signed him, we thought he would play at all on defense.
Right, yeah. I mean, this is the roster. I mean, they have a lot of linebackers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, look, there have been guys that have emerged on special teams, Craig James, Alex Singleton, some of those guys, and maybe that's why you keep them. But, I don't know. Look, wide receiver, like we talked about this, and I may emphasize this going into the season. This season was about making Carson Wentz feel comfortable, and it seems like they've almost done nothing to do that in season.
But he had his best game with all the young dudes. So
well, that's why I'm intrigued by this game. Is I think if he can go out, the defense, and this is a preview show, the defense is going to have a task of holding the Redskins under 20 points. They've been able to do that with 5 of their last 6 opponents. That said, Terry McLaurin in week 1 tore them a new tush. You know what I mean? And he's going to be a tough out, man. He's been a baller this season. And so I think at some point Carson Wentz is going to have to put up points. And, they're going to have to rely heavily on their running game.
Not Jordan Howard again.
Right. Miles Sanders is 61 total yards away from breaking Deshaun Jackson's scrimmage record. And I believe he's like, I think he's like 70 rushing yards away from breaking LaShawn McCoy's rookie rushing record. I'm featuring him and Boston Scott pretty heavily after watching this past game against the Giants.
I'm excited to see if Boston Scott can keep what he did going. And because, like, in a perfect world, then all of a sudden you have him and Miles Sanders locked in for next year, and then if you bring Jordan Howard back, that's like a perfect like trio of power, multi-dimensional, and pass-catching back that they kind of wanted this year with Darren Sproles, but it just didn't work out. But that's like the ideal 3-man rotation for Deuce Staley to work with.
And I think they can bring Jordan Howard back on the cheap.
Yeah, especially with the shoulder thing.
Yeah. And they would be the ones that would know the shoulder injury better than anyone else, too.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, they haven't put him on IR, so they at least think he can play.
Yeah.
Eventually. I don't know.
And maybe they're holding him for the Dallas game. You never know what's going on behind the scenes. But, yeah, I'm leaning heavily on the run here. The Redskins' defense is beaten up. Ryan Kerrigan's not around. They, their corners aren't very good. I think if the Eagles lose in Washington, there's I mean,
The Redskins are really bad.
They are.
It'll be because they're looking ahead to the Cowboys if they lose this game, to be honest. But,
the Eagles have won 5 straight against the Redskins. Last season they got into the playoffs by beating them 24-0
with a little help too. But
in Washington.
Yeah. Week 17. So let's get into the preview now. Before we do, we should mention that doesn't look like Lane Johnson will play like we expected. Jordan Howard won't. Nelson Aguilar won't. Derek Barnett, I don't believe, is practice this week, so he'll be gone again. Josh Sweat, look, he had maybe like a season-saving play last week, actually.
Yeah, the flea flicker?
The flea flicker, yeah. Which it was pretty embarrassing that they messed that up so badly, but Josh Sweat saved them. And he's looked pretty good. Like, at about the halfway point or around then, we talked about how there was barely anyone who has exceeded expectations. Maybe if the expectation was for him to break out, that was unrealistic, but he's exceeded like what he was last year. He's gotten better
for sure.
So
Vinny Curry had a great game,
and he's a young player, so it's promising, and he'll get a lot of snaps this week. But all right, let's get into this preview. Some matchups. I mean, you mentioned Terry McLaurin. I imagine Darby probably covers him, right?
Yeah.
Which that's scary. Probably he's been really bad the last few weeks. I think he's given up something like 4 passes of more than 30 yards or something.
The defense as a whole has given up 7 passing plays of 25 or more yards over the last 2 weeks.
And this is against the Miami Dolphins and the New York Giants.
Right. He gave up.
Not a great look, guys.
Darby gave up 2 plays of over 35 yards against the Giants. Look, Darby's not a very good number 1 corner. I mean, he's probably on most teams he's a number 2. And he's gotten work the last 2 weeks. That said, Jim Schwartz loves him. I would also rather have Darby on McLaurin than Mills. Yeah. Although, that said, Mills wasn't around in week 1, and maybe that would be what they would have done.
Something different.
I mean, the Eagles play sides. They don't travel their corners, but I would imagine for the most part, McLaurin will be in the slot or on the outside, and that'll be against Devontae Maddox and Ronald Darby.
Yeah, and so another area I'm looking at, Eric Flowers is on their offensive line. He's on the interior, I believe, right guard.
Mm-hmm. Or left guard. I thought he was left guard.
Either way, the Eagles' interior defensive lineman, if they don't destroy that dude, then...
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll be a good game for Fletcher Cox. Yeah. But then again, I thought it would be a good game for Fletcher Cox against the Giants and against the Dolphins. And he's had okay games away from the ball.
He makes his impact away from the ball sometimes, yeah.
Right. I'm interested to see Donald Penn versus Vinny Curry and Josh Sweat. Donald Penn is way past his prime, and that should be real fun. Also, I think... another interesting matchup is Quinton Dunbar against any of these wide receivers. Dunbar's actually raised his play.
Josh Norman was benched, wasn't he?
Yes. Yeah. So he's basically their number 1 corner. That'll be interesting. The Eagles aren't going to have to prepare for any tight ends. Jordan Reed's on IR. So is Vernon Davis.
Adrian Peterson will play in this game, though, and last year he had like that 95-yard touchdown or whatever it was. So.
Yeah, and then they realized they were playing the Redskins.
And then he didn't get anything else.
Right.
But still, I mean, I know Jim Schwartz talked about him the other day.
The goal of this game is to shut down Terry McLaurin and let Adrian Peterson
He's the only threat they have on their team. So.
You're fine getting gashed a little bit in the run game because this is a good Eagles run defense. So, in theory, you want to hold Adrian Peterson out of the red zone. If he's putting up yardage, great. Good for him. But you want to keep him out of the end zone. You want to hold them to field goals as opposed to touchdowns. And part of in doing that is making sure McLaurin doesn't beat you deep. Because that kid can run. I think he ran a 4.35.
Wow.
And he's a good possession receiver, too. He's making possession catches pretty regularly. So... I think he's 3rd amongst rookies in receiving yards and catches.
And he's like 700 yards and like 6 touchdowns, which are numbers that you don't see in Philadelphia. So.
Yeah, and he's tied for 2nd with a couple of different dudes among rookies with 6 touchdowns. So he's just an impressive player. And remember, everybody's going to be... Okay, so they're going to face Dwayne Haskins. Jim Schwartz historically does really well against rookie quarterbacks.
Yeah.
That said... Haskins and McLaurin went to college together at Ohio State. They do have a chemistry, so that shouldn't be overlooked.
Haskins has looked pretty good lately, too.
Yeah. I do think they can trick him into throwing interceptions. Yeah, I think this is where you see Timmy Jernigan and Fletcher Cox really set the tone. I think Brandon Graham could have a really good game. But their coverage is going to have to be good. And I think the linebackers are going to have to play well. Malcolm Jenkins is going to have to blitz well. I would not be shocked if you see Crevon LeBlanc blitz quite a bit in this one from their dollar package. But yeah, I mean, look, this game isn't all that interesting on paper, but, if you don't stop McLaurin, it's going to be rough.
Yeah. And Vaitai will start for Lane. They have no intention of moving Peters over to the right. I know there was some talk about that because Peters said he would, but I don't think they like moving around too many guys.
Stoutland doesn't like getting worse.
Since Kerrigan's not playing, you feel a little bit better about it. They have that dude Ryan Anderson who hasn't had a great year, but they did use a second-round pick on him pretty recently. So that'll be something. I mean, if Vaitai has a bad game, then it's always rough.
Montez Sweat is interesting.
Yeah.
But, he's having kind of a Derek Barnett rookie year sort of thing where he's showing some flash, but he's not really dominating
numbers or anything. Yeah. What do you got? Prediction? I know our scores are pretty similar here.
I think I had earlier on in the week Eagles 19, Redskins 13. I'm going to stick with that. I do think this is a game where it's supposed to be really nice out. I mean, it's going to be cold, but it's supposed to be relatively nice in Landover. I do think that there could be some issues with protection with Vaitai, though I will say when he knows that he's the starter going into the week, he has played significantly better.
Still not great, but
but significantly better. I do think that this is an opportunity to run the ball. I think they can control the clock. I don't think this is going to be a high-scoring game. Obviously, combined, that would be 32 points. I do think that they're going to allow a massive play to Terry McLaurin, and early. I think the Eagles will trail in this game at some point.
Yeah, I could. I mean, that week one game, if you remember, it looked like the Eagles were going to lose it for a little while, and then Deshaun did his Deshaun thing, and then never played again. But
I do think it's a critical thing, and I'm not overlooking Haskins at all, but I do think it's a big boost for the Eagles' morale and game planning. Haskins as opposed to Keenum. I think Keenum's a guy who's played them a lot and knows what to expect from Jim Schwartz.
For 380 yards that week one, I think. Yeah.
Right. From Haskins' perspective, the dude's had a lot of turnovers. He's not Daniel Jones in the pocket fumbling all the time, but he has been loose with the football. I also don't think he's been very accurate. He's not throwing to a lot of... I mean, Paul Richardson and Terry McLaurin are his wide receivers. That's pretty much it. He doesn't have the safety net of Vernon Davis anymore because he's on IR.
Or even Jamison Crowder. Yeah.
Right. Their running game is very one-dimensional. It's Adrian Peterson, and that's it.
Geis is hurt again.
Right. Wendell Smallwood isn't really playing a ton. God bless him.
Remember him?
Frankly, at this point, I would rather have Wendell Smallwood than Jai in this running back room.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's for another podcast.
When they cut Ajayi.
Or when Wendell runs for like 40 yards in this game.
Oh, man.
But anyway.
Revenge game, baby.
Yeah, revenge. Oh, by the way, Trayvon Hester's playing actually kind of well as a rotational guy. He wasn't
playing that much for them before,
yeah. Excuse me. So... Again, I think the Eagles are set up to win this game. I think they win by at least one score. Well, that's how you win. But like by at least 2 field goals. I do think so. You know how I like to write out the story of the game.
Yeah, the specifics.
Yeah, I think McLaurin scores on them deep early, and then they kick a field goal, and I think the Eagles are down 10-9 at halftime. The Eagles have to settle for field goals early. And then in the second half, they outscore them 9-3. They score a touchdown, but miss a field goal and then kick a field goal, something like that.
Something like that.
I do think that there's going to be a moment where there's intense panic amongst the fan base.
Of course, that's a weekly occurrence.
Right, but I don't think they're going to dominate this Redskins team.
I mean, we all put them DOA in that first half last week. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Dolphins showed that this team in a regular year
can lose to anybody.
Well, just they're not playoff worthy,
yes,
and they can prove us wrong over the next 3 games because Carson Wentz is going to have to will this team to victory. They're going to have to depend on a second-year running back who is basically a special teams player and a rookie running back who has had his struggles, as productive and as talented as he is, to win this game. I mean, every game's important. You can say, oh, well, the Redskins are 3-10. Well, yeah, they're standing in the way of the Eagles being 7-7.
The Dolphins were 2-9, weren't they?
Yep. So, I mean, this is an important game. and the Eagles have to treat it as such. They can't play down to their competition. So I think, look, the Eagles should win this game. I don't know about handedly, but they should win it.
Yeah, I had a similar score. I had Eagles 17, Redskins 13. Again, they wind up scoring more because they scored a lot at the end last week. I mean, they still only scored 23 points, which isn't a lot. So the Redskins aren't good. They should kill the Redskins, but I just don't see the Eagles killing anybody for a while. So, like you said, I believe they're going to have a panicky moment. I think they're maybe start out slow. Maybe McLaurin scores in the first play or something like that.
Yeah, something. Yeah.
If they don't beat the Redskins, then again, they don't deserve to be in the playoffs anyway. But they definitely don't if they lose.
Well, and I think what's interesting too is
the Cowboys could lose this week to the Rams pretty easily.
Right. Yeah. So what's interesting, right, is the Rams-Cowboys game is at 4:25, so the Eagles will have that carrot in front of them whether they like it or not. They control their own destiny, and if they win this weekend and Dallas loses, they'll be ahead in the NFC East race. They'll have the momentum.
It's wild.
Yeah, it is wild, but it's the wild, wild East, I guess is what you would call it.
Wild, wild East.
And it's been about as much fun to watch as Will Smith's Wild, Wild West. So, steampunk. But look, I think if the Eagles can win this game, no matter how they win it, I do think they'll have the momentum going into the next week, because I do think if you're the Eagles, you do rest Eric Barnett, you do rest Nelson Aguilar, you do rest Lane Johnson with the hope that they're back for the Dallas game. Now, Lane Johnson has a high ankle sprain that sometimes can take a while, but we also know that Lane's a maniac he plays through stuff. I think
he was supposed to miss remember when he was supposed to miss a month last year? He missed one game, I think?
Yeah, the dude basically had one leg for an entire month and played at a pretty high level.
He really well at the end of the season.
The only long-term injury that I guess you'd have concern about is Nelson Aguilar, because it does seem like his knee has been a prolonged problem.
And you also wonder how much he's thinking about his free agency also, and it's a fair thing to think about.
Right, and it's also fair to wonder if he really adds that much of an element at this point.
Josh Perkins had more catches this week than Nelson has had since week 3. That's
tough beat, bro.
The season in a nutshell right there. Because you and I both thought Nelson was going to have a good year.
Yeah, we did. But I guess we were wrong. So bottom line, the Eagles should win this game. They're the better team even with all these injuries. They're probably going to have a home field advantage, to be honest. There's going to be Eagles fans that travel this. When you looked on the schedule...
You mean on Sunday or something?
Yeah. When you looked on the schedule and you're an Eagles fan, you want to go to a guaranteed win on the road, this is probably one of the 2 games along with Miami. Whoops.
Although if you were booking this before the season, you probably thought the Eagles would be close to wrapping up.
Yeah, you would. You would have thought that they were steamrolling. But I will say this. We've been very critical of Doug. If they do end up winning these next 3 games and making the playoffs,
he deserves credit.
He deserves a ton of credit for not only making the playoffs 3 straight times, but doing so in 3 straight seasons where he has lost players at an alarming rate. And I don't, you know what? If they do make it, he deserves a lot more praise than Howie does, because I don't feel like Howie has supplemented this roster very well.
Nope.
Speaking of supplementing and making something better, let's get to the questions.
Yeah, let's get some questions.
And comments.
This is from our post-game pod for Monday night. It's been a shorter week, so we weren't able to do a midweek one. But do we really? Nathan Evans says, why no love for JJ's catch? You didn't mention it at all. I don't remember I guess we didn't.
I thought we mentioned him.
Well, I think it was also because that kind of blew up a little bit after the game, because it's hard for us to see the specifics of a play, but the replay was going wild on social media. We messed up on that. It was a great catch.
And frankly, it wasn't
he didn't even need to catch it. It was like a hold, and then he had that great catch, great tracking.
And I spoke to him after the game to give you some insight, and he said that I know for a fact we brought it up because I gave you this anecdote. He said after the play, you notice he goes kind of crazy, but he's like, I wanted to do something crazier, but I was so tired from playing all these snaps I couldn't.
Yeah. So we mentioned it, but we didn't
we didn't
go into it.
Yeah. Sorry.
Another Zack laugh comment. Marlon DeFilo. Sorry if I said that wrong, even though you're mean to me here and you spelled my name wrong. I challenged Zach to go 5 minutes without laughing while talking on the next podcast.
I think he did that.
I might have did that today.
Hey, look at that. Look at you. Small miracle.
Well, I did read that before I read this, so maybe it was in my head.
Oh, maybe. Yeah.
You're making an impact, Marlon.
Oh, that was good.
And this is from Monday, so... he was pretty predictive here. But Skylar Allen said if Alshon's done for the year, you have to bring J-Matt back. bring up Mark and Michelle and Rod Davis. They brought up Rob Davis. They might bring up Mark and J-Matt back in San Francisco for a week at least, and then he'll be back.
What a treat!
By the end of the year.
What a treat! Ain't life grand?
Ain't life grand? I mean, that's pretty far to be going back and forth between Philly and San Fran.
Yeah, man, he's getting that mileage.
Yeah,
there you go.
Mr. Ridley says Wentz is about to go full 2017 mode now. Look out! Wow, we got some confidence in Wentz again.
Well, I think this game, the Giants win, was big for his confidence. I don't know if it'll necessarily pay off, but whatever.
Yeah. Brent Donaldson says we need Jordan Howard back so bad.
Do you? He caught 4 passes for 33 yards.
The best running back in the NFL. What are you talking about?
Yeah, hey. Jordan Howard. Sorry. Dude, Mike, come on. I thought you said Jordan Matthews. I was only half listening.
You're still thinking about making jokes about him.
Yeah. I mean, it's slow hanging fruit.
I'm not gonna read this whole comment, just the end of it, because it's the rest of it. Just so my mic was for some reason messed up last episode, and people were mad about it. And Mark Valor talked about that for a little bit, and then he ended his comment with a dozen ways to improve this, but until it happens, he's the Nelson Aguilar of podcasting, talking about me. It's a tough break for my guy Zack.
The rough.
Yeah, I just talked in the third person there too. Daniel Timms, I honestly don't see us winning the NFC East. I think we'll struggle greatly against Washington, possibly win but barely, and then lose to the Cowboys. That's a possibility. Armin Higanovich, I like Greg Ward a lot. I think he has potential to stay on the team next year as a starter. JJ Arcega-Whiteside is getting better. We don't need Alshon. It's time for the new and out with the old. So he likes Greg Ward quite a bit. I mean, he's looked pretty good. Let's see. Kaleo Kamekona says, yay for Boston Scoot. A little callback to when he misspelled it a few weeks ago.
Nice.
It's such a funny, it's like perfect for a skill set, too.
Because he does scoot down the field. That's fair.
It's beautiful. XX King X Dijon XX says, hungry dogs run faster. Keep the young practice squad players out there. Hey,
but do they, isn't Dijon a mustard?
It is.
I wonder if those hungry dogs
I'm not a
use
huge
that.
Dijon mustard guy, to be honest.
But I wonder if the hungry dogs use that Dijon mustard. Our favorites.
Oh, yeah, we got to read that. Jamie and Candace Palmer. What's up, guys? I want to know why only 3 wideouts dressed. Some decisions are baffling to me. Us, too. We signed Michelle. Michelle. He's saying Mark and Michelle to the active roster and let him, JJ, and Ward be our receivers. Keep up the good work, guys.
I'd say, I think they, like I said earlier in the podcast, I think they think that Perkins is an upgrade over Hollins, which in turn is probably why they thought, hey, they'd be okay. They've basically been running with 3 wide receivers anyway. So,
all right. I think we can just read this last one. Jared Farron said Wentz had his most impressive throw of the season tonight. Not the fourth quarter touchdown pass, but the nice little 8 to 11 yard bullet to Greg Ward. I haven't seen Wentz throw a ball that hard to a receiver that hasn't broken his route yet. I can't remember that throw.
I do. It was an impressive throw. I think
He also had a good throw on the touchdown that was called back from Greg Ward too.
Yes. The throw though to Zack Ertz in the fourth quarter was maybe the most impressive throw I think he's had all year. Tight window. I mean, he literally threw it like he was a shotgun. Yeah. Like it was a human shotgun. I'm sure he would love that analogy. Anyway.
All right, well, before we wrap up, just one more time, you guys got to sign up for our Eagles Extra. Let us know what you think. Send us some messages. We'll give you some exclusive. Like I said, $4.99 a month. First 2 weeks are free, so you can test it out, see what you think.
Send us questions.
We're going to be in the locker room now. Headed in the locker room now. We're probably going to send out some messages about some things we hear that you won't get on the website or on Twitter. So make sure you guys sign up as soon as you can. We'll end on that note. Leave us some comments for Sunday's game. We'll try and get to them while we're in great Landover, Maryland. Let us know if you guys are going to be there.
Actually, I'll say this. If you send us a question on Eagles Extra, we will read it on air and answer it after we've answered it to you exclusively first, and we'll air it.
So basically, text us, guys.
Yeah, during the game. Hit us up.
After the game, before the game, whenever. You can do in the middle of the night. We might not respond, though.
Zach will. He's up.
Yeah, I am up pretty late. All right, we'll end on that note. Thanks for listening, guys.